This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
And this is Maureen Bogey.
And you have just docked aboard the Creep Street Podcast.
Woo!
Welcome aboard, sailors. We're ready to set sail under turbulent waters. But first, of course, like, rate, subscribe, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. We're also on TikTok. On Facebook, we also have a forum where daily we like to interact with our listeners. It's called Citizens of the Milky Way, a Creep Street fan page. You just go there, click the Let Me In button, and one of us will let you in. And of course, if once a week is not enough,
and it's not.
It's not, folks. You just head on over to patreon.com/Creep Street Podcast for all sorts of goodies. In fact, we have a new one-time shout-out.
Yes, we do. We're so excited to have you with us.
Folks, give it on up for the menace, Chris Melitakos.
Chris, you are so welcome. We're so happy to have you as a citizen of the Milky Way. You are a true believer and a true king.
That's right. That is right. Now, Maureen, last week, what did we give him? We gave him a few. We gave him the Haunting of the Wyrick House.
That's right.
And then we gave him listener stories.
We sure did. We hope you enjoyed both of those episodes. They were a blast to make, both of them. And we've received great feedback, so we're hoping you enjoyed them.
Oh, I love doing that listener stories episode. Some really creepy stories.
Oh, really creepy stories in there. So if you haven't listened to those episodes, we highly recommend you check those out because they're two bangers, baby, if I do say so myself.
Well, wouldn't you know it, it's a full moon here on Creep Street.
Oh, gosh.
And something's got us howling at the moon. Maureen, what are we talking about this week?
This week, we're switching it up, folks. This week, we are talking about Hellhounds. That's right, we are talking about Hellhounds this week on Creep Street Podcast. It's hot out. Hell has been broken open.
Yeah, it's hot, baby.
And we are going for it with our Hellhounds. I had some fantastic sources this week. One is a lovely, lovely YouTube series that we've talked about many times on this podcast. It's called Monstrum by Dr. Emily Zarka.
Such a great, we say it every time, but such a great little channel. And it's also, the animations are great, and it's kind of family friendly too. So like, if you got kids or something that are into the spooky stuff, but you don't want to freak them out, a great kind of educational channel.
Yeah, it's great.
Really cool stuff.
They have so many cool topics on there, or so many cool monsters or different lores, things like that. Highly recommend you check that out.
Right.
One was another great YouTube video called What Are Hellhounds? 7 Types of Hellhounds. And it is from the Mythology and Fiction Explained channel. Also, we used the great website villains.fandom.com.
Okay.
As well as a smattering of Wikipedia, things like that. Also, Reddit. is very helpful as well. Also, I just want to mention this right off the top. When we did C2E2, which is Chicago's Comic-Con.
The Chicago Comics and Entertainment Expo.
Yes, C2E2. We did that this past December. And while we were there, someone came up to us and told us a story about how they saw a hellhound at a national park.
Oh, that's right.
And it was such a great story, but I don't have all of the details in my memory. So if that is you, and if you are listening to this podcast, please reach out to us at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us on any of our socials. We would love to hear your story and share it on the podcast.
And by the way, we will be at C2E2 again this year.
Yes.
On Friday, August 5th. Our panel will be at 4:15 p.m.
Yes, please join us if you are in the Chicago area or planning to be at C2E2. We would love, love, love to see you there. All right, now let's get on with the program.
Oh, yeah.
So early dogs, or early death dogs, I should say, were guides and protectors. There were a bunch of different examples of this throughout history, throughout the world as well. One is Anubis, who was the jackal or jackal-headed dog who was the Egyptian god of death and mummification. He protected the body and guided the soul into the afterlife. There was also Shyama and Sabala, who were Hindu hounds, and they guarded the gods of death's gates, and they both had 2 sets of eyes. There's also Cerberus, who is the 3-headed hound who guards Hades, and keeps the souls there and keeps the heroes out of the underworld. That is in Greek mythology. Also in Harry Potter, okay, let's be real.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And also in some Latin American traditions, dogs would guide souls to the next world, and if you mistreated a dog in your life, your soul could be left to wander for eternity.
Oh, boy.
So you better take good care of dogs.
Take good care of those dogs.
And in some Middle Eastern and Indian traditions, dogs were escorts into the afterlife. And sometimes they would actually bring in a dog into the room of a dying person to shepherd them into the next world as they left this earthly plane.
That's actually very sweet.
I know, isn't that really cute?
It's almost like a support. What do they call them? Like a
therapy dog or like a support animal.
Yeah, like an early form of that.
Right, absolutely.
That's really cool.
Also, our dog Banshee is staring at me right now, and it's just giving me the creeps. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
She's very cute.
Our little hellhound is
hellhound
presiding over this episode right now.
Mm-hmm. She sure is. And in Nordic sagas, there's a dog called Garm, who was a blood-stained hellhound. His mistress was the death goddess Hel, and it's said that his howl would signal the beginning of Ragnarok.
Wow.
So I know what you guys are thinking, though. You're like, okay, some of these aren't really that bad, though. Like some of these dogs, they're actually, like Dylan said, they're actually kind of sweet stories or kind of just cool traditions of thinking of dogs and their connection to the afterlife or to the other plane or anything like that.
Right.
But things kind of changed as time went on. A lot of this has to do with Christianity coming in.
Oh, yes.
And doing what they would do best, which was kind of taking the traditions and the oral stories and the folklore or the religion of the area and kind of change it to reflect Christianity. So kind of adding the devil into it or adding the fear of witchcraft into it, making these things seem negative.
Yeah. No one does horror like early Christianity.
Oh, truly. Honestly, kind of icons.
They really, kind of like a lot of our horror tropes we know today, kind of came out of the early church trying to adopt or erase early pagan beliefs.
Right. It kind of backfired because now it's just kind of like dope stories.
Yeah.
But dogs, specifically black dogs, have been used as more of a kind of metaphorical way as well throughout the years.
Right.
Roman poet Horace wrote of a, quote, dark companion or a black dog who symbolized misfortune and despair. And black dogs are often associated with illness and depression. In fact, Winston Churchill called his troubles with depression his, quote, black dog.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, and it wasn't just something he did, but that is just a famous example of it.
So it was in the parlance of the day.
Of the day, yes. And it was for a long, long time because, Roman poet Horace was also kind of saying the same thing too.
Right, yeah.
And I think this kind of makes sense because humans both fear and revere dogs because dogs can be wonderful companions, helpers, things like that, but they also can be aggressive and can be a little frightening.
Right.
So this dichotomy that they have really kind of makes sense. So we talked about the background here, about hellhounds, not about hellhounds necessarily, but just about hounds, black dogs, things like that, how they have kind of influenced history and society.
Right, of course.
But I think we really need to get into true hellhound territory.
Oh, yes, please. Take us there.
As we said before, Christianity really blew this up, this idea that hellhounds were negative, spooky, scary creatures, especially these black dogs. And there is a very interesting story of how black dogs could signal death and despair.
Uh-oh, let's hear it.
Now, this tale apparently happened in 1552 when Cardinal Crescentis of London was writing a letter to the Pope. While he was doing this, a huge black dog with flaming eyes appeared and ran under the table he was sitting. He freaked out, of course, and ran out and called his servants to come in and remove the strange dog, but when they came into the room, nothing was there. Soon thereafter, the cardinal became sick and was bedridden. And while he was dying in his bed, he kept screaming out that there were dogs climbing up on his bed that no one else could see. And he shortly thereafter passed away.
Whoa, okay. And this was in the 1500s?
The 1500s, yes. Now, there is reason to believe that this was a made-up story by someone who was trying to discredit Cardinal Crescentis. But either way, an interesting story.
Oh, interesting. So it might have also been a little bit of propaganda against him.
Yes.
Wow, okay, very interesting.
An interesting story nonetheless. There was also a 1574 demonic possession case of English lawyer Robert Briggs. He said that an ugly, shaggy black dog with a reddish coat, a black and reddish coat, I should say, would follow Briggs around all over London with these red eyes. This scared Briggs so badly that apparently one time he jumped into the Thames, thinking that this black dog, this hellhound, was chasing him.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
And this was in what year?
1574.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yes. The dog was said to be the devil himself in disguise. There are other possession accounts from the 15th century, and they said that in these possession accounts, the symptoms of being possessed were sounding like a hellhound, acting like a wild dog, or being able to communicate with dogs.
Oh, interesting.
And at the turn of the last century, even, there was a demonic possession case where they said that the victim, William Somers, was able to communicate with the devil in the form of a talking black dog.
Now, I have heard that, like the idea of like the devil coming to you in the shape of a dog, or,
right.
You know, we hear that a lot, even a rabbit, or,
right.
You know, various different creatures. And I've heard like of a black dog before, or goat, or...
Right.
Right. Okay, very interesting.
Yes. I know I mentioned Harry Potter before, but it is kind of interesting. There is a black dog in Harry Potter, which is, spoiler alert, Sirius Black.
Oh, that's right.
And I think this kind of makes sense too, where this black dog is actually a positive figure, but it's very scary at first, and it's transient, and you don't really know where it is or what it's doing. So I think that's just kind of this history of the fear of black dogs brought into today.
Right. And then there was that three-headed dog.
Right.
That was like a guard dog, right? It was like which one was that?
That was in the first one.
That was
Fluffy is its name.
Fluffy, that's right.
Right, and that is guarding to go down into the underbelly of the school, or going down into the underworld, you could say.
Oh.
And that is like Cerberus from Greek mythology.
Absolutely. Oh, clever.
Yes. But hellhounds in general are associated with transient places. And this is something that we have heard many times over and over again within the paranormal. They're either in places literally of travel where things are kind of neither here nor there, like airports or train stations or highways or things like that, crosswalks.
Right.
Crossroads. Also places where there is water.
Okay, interesting.
Yes. Now, the presence of a hellhound foretells death and disaster for those who see it. In German folklore, hellhounds take the form of shaggy black dogs that have glowing red eyes. But these dogs are often poodles, which is interesting.
Really?
Yes.
That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, because poodles are actually German hunting dogs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it kind of makes sense that they would see like a shaggy version of a poodle as this being.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah. Now, there is a Catalan myth where the Dip is an evil black hairy dog who sucks people's blood. And in this folklore, he is said to have one injured leg. But even though there are stories of hellhounds all over the world, they're really prevalent in Great Britain, especially English folklore, but really all over the UK.
And then I believe like the Sherlock stories kind of gave them a resurgence. The Hounds of Baskerville really brought it into the modern era in a weird way.
Exactly. That's so true. I believe the main inspiration for Sherlock bringing these hounds back into society was the story of the Black Shuck. If I'm correct here, the Black Shuck is from Suffolk, Norfolk, and Essex, and is either a hound from hell, a demon familiar, or both. The Black Shuck is often accompanied by a foul smell and can be the size of a horse, and is sometimes headless.
Wow, okay.
It haunts graveyards, dark forests, and transient places. Sometimes these things would scare people just to when they thought they were going to die from fright, when then they would let them go. Like they liked the fear, or maybe they fed off of the fear.
Wow, okay. So it's like another form of like shadow people in a way.
Right, yeah, we've heard of this before. Now, the first time we see the Black Shuck in writing was in 1577. According to this legend, there was a mass at an Anglican church in Blytheburg when a huge thunderstorm rang out, and there was a big clap of thunder. And when this clap of thunder rang out, the church doors opened, and there was the Black Shuck. This huge black dog with glowing red eyes, with shaggy fur, huge paws. It ran into the building and ran all around and killed 2 people before the steeple itself from the church collapsed.
Wow, okay.
Now, apparently, the same day, another church in Bungay experienced the same thing. A Black Shuck, maybe the same Black Shuck, visited the church as well and also killed 2 people by clamping down on their necks. Both churches apparently had scorch marks on the ground where their paws touched the ground.
Ooh, okay.
Now, there's an 18th century case that is also very interesting involving the Black Shuck. There was a woman in Hertfordshire, England. She was killed for suspected witchcraft, but it turns out this chimney sweep actually framed her for this crime.
Oh, wow.
So the chimney sweep was then was hanged right almost exactly where the woman was hanged.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And after the chimney sweep was hanged, a black dog appeared in the area. Apparently it was big as a Newfoundland, but malnourished. Had shaggy black hair and incredibly large teeth. And glowing red eyes. But nothing really happened here. There was no attack or anything. This dog would just appear and disappear.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's almost like that man, that was his true form or something.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah.
And just kind of the irony of a chimney sweep, you're dealing with fireplaces and hot, and the soot, the dark, and then you have this black hellhound with fiery red eyes, and it just kind of goes together. Yeah.
No, it really does. But what's weird, though, I've heard, is that sometimes these Black Shucks would appear in the evening to walk lone women home, ensuring that they got home safely.
Okay, that's interesting.
Now, in Lincolnshire, there's also it's funny saying Lincolnshire because there's a town in Illinois called Lincolnshire.
Yeah.
So, crazy times. But anyway, in Lincolnshire, there is a taller, thinner version of the Black Shuck that appears near ponds and is often surrounded by trees. In Yorkshire, they have their own version of the shaggy black dog of the hellhound called the Barkest. Now, this is a monstrous, huge dog with huge claws and enormous teeth.
And a big old set of balls.
A big old set of balls, baby. They didn't say that in my sources, but we can assume that they probably had a big old set of balls.
Hey, big teeth, big paws, big balls.
That's what they say. The Barcast would prey on lone travelers and was even known to shapeshift. It could shapeshift into a headless man that could vanish into flames, a headless woman, just a regular black dog, a rabbit, or a white cat. So that kind of reminds me of familiars.
Absolutely.
And, just kind of general witchcraft stories.
Absolutely.
So it kind of goes together. Now, in northern England, there is a hellhound called the Guy Trash. This is a black dog that would lurk around roads waiting for weary travelers that would then lead them astray. The Guy Trash could also shapeshift into just horses, mules, or regular dogs. If you could see their eyes and if they were burning red eyes, you knew that they were evil. But if their eyes were just kind of normal looking eyes, you knew that they weren't coming for you, at least that night.
Oh, okay. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. There's also the Cúna, which is the Welsh version of a hellhound. They are of like this very white fur with red-tipped ears.
Oh, red-tipped ears. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of makes sense going back to the Celts because the Celts believed that red was kind of the color of the other side or of death.
Oh, interesting. Okay, very interesting.
But these guys were kind of different. They were more kind of benign, these hellhounds.
Right.
They wouldn't necessarily attack you or come for you, the Cúna. There's also the Maureen and Dylan, which is from the Isle of Man. There is a famous story about the Maureen and Dylan that happened in the Isle of Man, where a guard who was drunk said that he would go out and deal with one of these hellhounds. He went off alone into the corridors of the castle, but not too long after that, there were crazy screams heard all over the place. When they eventually found him, all he could mention was the dog, and not too long after that, he died.
Interesting. Okay.
In English and Scandinavian folklore, so this is not just from the UK, but also Scandinavia, there is the Church Grim. Now, this was kind of another benign or even maybe benevolent dog or hellhound. Now, this was a shaggy black dog that would watch over the church and kind of ensure its safety.
Oh, okay.
So, what are all of these sightings of hellhounds? What is going on? You know, that's my question. Some people say that these sightings are culturally created biases, that when we have scary moments in our life, like near-death experiences or crazy rainstorms or things like that, that we see things that aren't really there. And we all see the same thing because of culture that, you know, that we all are aware of. Like, we've all heard of scary dogs, so then we see scary dogs. Kind of like the Hat Man, where we see the Hat Man because we've all heard of Freddy Krueger. That scares us. We associate scary man that we see at night wearing a hat as being scary. We all see that. That's just a thought. Other people say that it could be people's pet big cats, or big cats that have escaped from zoos as well. Have either escaped from private residences or from zoos.
Oh, interesting.
Like panthers that we're seeing out in the wild that shouldn't be there because we don't think of them being there, but they've, you know, escaped and seen them. Like, there's this really spooky video on YouTube you can watch. If you just Google hellhounds, it's like the third or the fourth thing that comes up. I think it's from Destination America. And it's like you see a video of what looks like a hellhound, but I also could see it being like a panther or something that has escaped. It's a really weird video. You should YouTube it and check it out. It's very weird. Or maybe it's faked. Who knows? But regardless, it's scary, okay?
Yeah.
And the smell, the foul smell that is often accompanied by these hellhounds could possibly be hydrogen sulfate gas or sulfite gas that comes from decomposing plant matter, especially all around the UK. You know, it's very wet and, you know, lush. So it makes sense that maybe when we think we see something and we have a foul smell, that really it's just the hydrogen sulfide. So what are hellhounds? I don't know. Kind of a scary idea.
Yeah. They seem to be many things depending on where you're from.
Exactly.
Yeah, it seems like, and depending on where you're from, they can even be good signs or bad signs. It's just, it's amazing. Just like we were talking about the other day, the color red, how red meant so many different things to different cultures.
Right, absolutely.
Some thought red was lucky. Some thought red was a bad omen. Some thought red meant this or that. Like, it's amazing how much it varies culture by culture, but there's usually some sort of a hellhound in many different cultures.
Exactly. So I wanted to close out today's episode with a story, a no-sleep story from Reddit.
Ooh.
It is from Reddit user Laza Roses, and it is titled, I Think I Was Saved by a Hellhound. I've never shared anything on Reddit before, but most of my life, I've been sort of a supernatural magnet. My friends have been encouraging me to share some of my stories. I might post this one in a few different places, just to see if it sparks any interest. I'm not ever going to use any real names in my stories. Let's pretend my name is Faye. This happened about 5 years ago, when I was still in high school. At the time, I was really close friends with a guy. Let's call him Jason. I had recently told Jason about how a lot of things happened to me that are difficult to explain. We kind of got to talking about my different encounters, and he asked me, seemingly hesitantly, if I had ever seen a demon. I said that I didn't think anything quite so sinister had ever crossed my path. Jason then explained to me that his mom was worried that something strange had happened in their house. She said she had gotten sudden chills, heard some strange noises, and was feeling uneasy in general in the house lately. Now, at this point, I had exactly zero experience with demons or anything of the sort, so I was not aware there was anything to really worry about. I told Jason I would come over that weekend and see if I felt anything out of the ordinary. A few nights later, my phone lights up at 4 a.m. It's Jason. He says I need to come over ASAP, that something wasn't right. He said he'd been hearing scratches in the walls, and he had dismissed it as just a squirrel or something until that night, when the scratches started knocking. He said he could swear it was like someone was knocking rhythmically from inside the walls. I was at his house by sunrise. I was preparing myself for the worst when I got to his house. The only thing I knew about demons was what I had seen in movies. I was ready for head spinning and projectile vomit. When I got there, it was nothing. I felt nothing. Everything seemed completely normal. I went all over the house, put my ears to the walls. I even checked out the creepy basement. I felt nothing strange or sinister. I didn't want to make Jason feel like an idiot, so I just gently assured him that whatever was there was gone now, and that he didn't have anything to be afraid of. Secretly, I thought he had just over-exaggerated the whole thing. We all left the house later that day. Later that evening, I was back at his house for dinner. His parents went to bed, and we were in his living room downstairs talking about nothing in particular. The conversation eventually shifted naturally over towards his mother's suspicions. We were talking about the scratching and the knocking in the walls, and we were kind of joking around about it. You know that feeling when you're talking about something that you know you shouldn't really be talking about? The conversation just felt off, suddenly. I felt wrong for talking about it, just a general feeling of uneasiness all around. I abruptly changed the subject. I eventually headed home around 11 p.m. Jason lives pretty far out of town in a heavily wooded area. I was maybe halfway home, and suddenly, inexplicably, horrifyingly, a feeling hit me like a brick wall. This white-hot rage overcame me. It's difficult to describe. It was like I had passed through a fog and was on the other side. I had come out homicidal. Something was in Jason's house, and it had followed me home. I don't believe I was possessed because I remember it all. It was definitely me. I was just this cocktail of aggression. Then, in the middle of the road, I saw what I thought at first was a wolf. Then I got closer to it. The more I realized it wasn't an animal I had ever seen before. It had all the physical traits of a dog or a wolf, but it was so much bigger. It had wild black fur and its teeth were bared. It looked simultaneously ragged and enormous. It was abnormally low to the ground. That's when I realized it was crouching. It made a dead sprint for my car, and I was too close to it to slow down in time. I knew the size of the animal would likely total my car. I braced myself for a crash. I braced and waited and opened my eyes, and it was gone. So was whatever had followed me home. I told the story to a few of my friends, and they all agreed that it sounds like the dog I had seen was a hellhound, and it was looking for whatever had followed me home and took it back to wherever it came from.
Wow, well, Maureen, thank you for sharing that story.
Of course, a spooky, scary story, but that one also kind of seems like maybe it was helping her because it, maybe not purposely helping her, but it took away this intense hatred that she was feeling.
Right.
So I don't know, it's something from hell, I guess, but that is a scary story.
All right, well, that's going to wrap us up for Hellhounds. Maureen, thank you for all of that research.
Oh my gosh, it is my pleasure. I'm so happy to do it.
Well, I got the names of some hellhounds that are about to break loose.
Please.
Folks, the names of our top-tier Patreon subscribers, of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face Via Lundqvist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the Oh-So-Suave Sean Richardson, the British Bone Breaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Sir of Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Vuren, the arch-nemesis Aaron Bird, the sadistic Sergio Castillo, the rapscallion Ryan Crum, and the beast Benjamin Huang.
Whoa. Thank you so much to all of our top-tier Patreon donors, to all of our donors, and to all of you. But a special shout-out to our top-tier Patreon donors. We're so happy to have you, and if you want to join them, feel free to check out patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast.
Please like, rate, subscribe, give us that 5 stars on whatever outlet you listen to. Give us the whatever the equivalent of top rating is. Of course, evangelize the name of Creep Street. Tell your friends, family, loved ones. Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
A good night and goodbye.
Goodbye.